Welcome to episode 12 of the Princeton Podcast with Mayor Mark Freda. In this episode, Mark caught up with Kate Bech, the executive director of the Princeton YMCA. In addition to describing the variety of popular YMCA programs, Kate also shared some exciting news about the expansion of the Princeton YMCA with the Somerset YMCA as of March 1st. So without any further introduction, let's join our host, Mark Freda, and his guest, Kate Bech, for episode 12 of the Princeton Podcast.
Kate, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Sure thing. So, Kate, let's start with this one. Where is the Princeton YMCA located, and how long has it been there?
So I'm sure most Princetonians who've lived there for many years, it's pretty hard to miss. It's located at 59 Paul Robeson Place, and it's been at that location since, I believe, the keystone in the original building was 1958.
Yeah, so I would hope that most people that live in Princeton do have an idea that it's right there at the corner of Paul Robeson and 206. So. Kate, another natural question would be, how long have you been the executive director at the YMCA?
So I find this rather astonishing to say this out loud, but it will. I've been with the organization now just shy of 15 years. And prior to that, I had been with another YMCA many years ago in the Philadelphia area. And then in between, I had gigs with the Girl Scouts. So I've had, plenty of experience in the human services nonprofit arena.
Yeah, well, that's great, and I think your experience and knowledge is pretty evident. And I don't want to say too much because we're going to ask you a whole bunch of questions. But
sure,
all you do at the Y and all the Y does, it shows, reflects a lot upon you.
Well, thank you.
Okay, so it's interesting. My next question actually is, what does the executive director of the Princeton YMCA focus on these days?
Well, I suspect we're not too different than a lot of enterprises, whether that's nonprofit or commercial in the private sector. We're really in that place of coming out of the pandemic. That's the majority of our focus is regaining our financial footing, and that is a priority. But also, of course, throughout this crisis in the Y world, we really had to switch gears, and we've heard the word pivot quite a bit, but that was truly the case. Just because, of course, as the world turned upside down, community needs just went in a totally different direction, and there were some folks who had really immediate needs in terms of the human basics. So we transitioned to focusing on our most vulnerable members and making sure that there was food available, access to technology, internet, making sure that our kids were able to be a part of the virtual classroom. We also then moved quickly in conjunction with the Princeton Public Schools to provide support for remote learning, particularly for those families who don't have that good fortune and privilege of being able to work at home. And of course, a lot of those folks are essential workers in a whole range of areas. So, having to make that switch, while we saw need go up, and while concurrently we watched as our revenues went down. So the PPP loans were a major part of our ability to respond and stay the course. So the question of what an executive director's been focused on, that was really primarily what was taking up my attention and our board, and thinking through how can we match the resources we could access to the needs that were most immediate, and also, be responsive to our own employees and ensure that they're able to, have what they needed to do their work. So it was not unlike a lot of others. It was quite a bit of juggling, to say the least, and
Right.
some sleepless nights.
Yeah. So, it's interesting to see how the Y and others, you've mentioned other nonprofits have had to pivot and pick up maybe doing things they had not done as much of, or things totally different. And I know why everybody is very eager to be out of this whole pandemic. The impacts of the pandemic still continue. So I imagine the Y is still deeply involved in a number of the things that you just mentioned, and might be for a while to come. Is that true?
Yeah. We will continue to certainly be in. Mike Roseborough, who's one of our team members, he's very much a part of the consortium of folks in town who are working around food insecurity. So we still are a part of those efforts and have our own contributions on that front. Of course, our since young people have returned to the classroom, after school care was a huge need. And of course, with the staffing shortages at the beginning of this fall, that really was quite a difficult time for us, just to try to achieve the level of staffing that was needed in order to meet the certifications and criteria that the state mandates, meeting all of the ratio requirements and so forth, and ensuring that we could deliver the quality program when demand in that realm was also growing as families and parents were returning to work, and kids were back in the schools. So that also meant that our Princeton Young Achievers program, which is an after-school program that has been with the Y since 2011 and serves children in grades K through 5, that's a program that's a little different than sort of the traditional school-age childcare, only in that those children, and pre-pandemic, it was about 90 to 100 children we would serve. It's now around 50 right now. Those children are largely in need of that additional homework support. Our purpose is really to make sure that they're ready to learn the next school day. So, finding the resources to deliver that program has also been, a continuing challenge, because that programming is largely supported through public support, through contributions, grants. And as we had to downsize our staff, that meant, of course, our capacity to raise money was impacted. So, we have found a way to move through that and be able to provide that programming. But that would be an example where, the impact of seeing our memberships reduced and those earned revenues go down had an effect on the kinds of programming in that area where there is still significant need.
Right. So let me change gears a little bit, because part of the idea here is to talk only about the Y, but a little bit about you also.
Oh, sure.
Could you share where were you born? Where did you grow up?
So I was born in Michigan, but only lived there for about 6 months. My parents were from the Midwest originally, from Minnesota mostly, and for a lot of reasons, they decided, work was the driver for my dad, but decided that they really preferred living on the East Coast, and they identified my hometown of Swarthmore, Pennsylvania, as the place where we were going to live as a family. So I spent the vast majority of my youth, kindergarten through 12th grade, there and going through the public schools. And I often joke that frankly was one of the best training grounds to operate an organization in a college town. I have a deep appreciation for what the sort of characteristics and personalities and quirks that come with the college community. So, but yeah, I spent I loved growing up there. It was a wonderful experience. I still have family there, and I go back fairly often. So it feels like home.
That's great. That's great. So you're actually in training. As you grew up, you were in training for your future endeavors in your career.
Yeah, absolutely.
As long as we're talking about you, how about where you went to college? What did you have a major or?
So I did. And in fact, I mentioned Minnesota. So I think, in my 12 years growing up in Swarthmore, I decided that somewhere along the line, probably when I was a junior, I really had enough of the East Coast, and I'd made a decision to go to the Midwest. So my older brother had gone as far as Oberlin, Ohio. So I was sort of in the mode of a small liberal arts college, also growing up in a town with a small liberal arts college. So, but I knew that I wanted to be more in an urban setting rather than in the countryside. So I landed in the Twin Cities. So I went to Macalester College, which is a wonderful school located right in St. Paul, and ironically, where my dad was basically born and raised in St. Paul. And I loved it. I loved it. And whereas in high school, I had a lot of leadership roles. I was, vice president of student council. I was in a whole bunch of positions that way. When I went to college, I switched gears entirely, and I wasn't so interested in that aspect. So I actually have a major in studio arts, which comes as a surprise to a lot of people. So I spent those 4 years while I was in the liberal arts program, and I studied in a lot of areas, in the humanities primarily. I made a lot of art. So I have a deep passion for art, and it's another part of my world that I really enjoy. And I use those skills in my work at the Y too.
That's great. It's great. It's great to see all these things connect, over a lifetime, how the things you learn and experience
Tristan has arrived. Sorry, I forewarned you that my friend
go.
Tristan the cat would appear.
Your kitty cat's on the program.
Always in need of a little additional attention.
Kate, the Y has hosted a whole number of community events on what I call the Y fields, maybe better called your front yard. But so how do those events come about? I mean, do you guys reach out to these groups? These groups reach out to you? I mean, what's the magic behind all of that?
Well, that's a really good question, and that's something that we just love. That's become certainly since COVID, the front yard, the field has become an incredible asset. I mean, it's always been a wonderful place for us to have programs, and it's where we run our summer day camp, which is essential. But it's become such a fabulous meeting space for community members to celebrate and share together, or demonstrate in some way. So that's largely driven by the relationships that exist already among our staff and our board members. Just, I think, maybe it speaks to the continuity of not only myself having been there a long time, but my colleagues, my two senior staff members, Paul Ziegler and Lee Zink, have both been with me for 11 years. So, there are deep ties, deep relationships. And I think then as people see the possibilities of having that space be utilized, it's just then, other folks have taken an interest and reach out, and through the channels of friendships, relationships, working partnerships, these things just kind of come to pass, and it's wonderful. It's very organic. It's been great.
Yeah, and it's a great space, right? Because it's pretty centrally located. If you look at Princeton as a whole, it's close to the center of the town for sure. There's parking. You can easily walk, ride your bike there. I mean,
exactly.
Over the last couple of years, I've been to so many events there. It's it's quite a pleasure having the Y host any number of community events right there for everyone. That's very nice.
I've always felt, and I think and that's actually been articulated among our board members too, is that our location is what we consider to be our greatest asset. It's just wonderfully central to everything, but it also, I've often commented on how it's an interesting bridge between what are, very different neighborhoods, but still all one in the same community. So I love the symbolism of that, we bridge between, the Hodge Road neighborhood over to the John Street neighborhood, and we're for all. And that's always been the case.
Right. Which is great. So, one thing, so there's two buildings there. There's the YM and the YW. So, so just a little bit, right? They're separate. Even though they're both the same place, but they are unique organizations.
It's very unique to Princeton. You will not find this anywhere else, I dare say, in the country. So our history is kind of interesting. And so I mentioned in the 50s, the buildings were constructed. What was the story behind that is that the YMCA had the land, it had been bequeathed to them. The YWCA at the time had some cash in the bank. So logically, the two decided, let's get together and construct a facility that would serve both of our organizations. And of course, it was a very different time in how those organizations were organized and who they were serving. Of course, the YW for women and girls, and the YM was for men and boys. And then, of course, life goes on, time passes, the world changes. And so you have these two separate organizations chartered each by their respective national organizations with, complementary values. There's no doubt we have those complementary values and shared goals in many respects, but we are two distinctive groups, which is confusing, frankly, for the community. And for many, many years, up until 2016, we actually operated out of both of those buildings side by side. And the former YW executive director and I, her name was Judy Hutton, she and I would joke that, after 2016, when we had sort of rethought how we could organize ourselves on the campus just so we would do more for the community, enhance the experience for the community, and lessen the duplication and competition between us. But we often laughed that we would make far better neighbors than roommates. And I think that that's a universal thing that people can relate to. So in 2016, we were able to come to a great agreement and plan that the YW would reside in the one building and focus on the early childhood education. And whereas the YMCA would take over the building with what had been called the athletic building with the pool and the gymnasium and so forth, but also the field where we operate the day camp, because our area, we tend to be more focused on the school age children, so kindergarten and up to 12th grade. And then, of course, in the YMCA world, it's also very multi-generational. So we have we have something called the Golden Membership, a free membership for anybody who's 85 years or older. So, we do have all ages at the Y. But that's a little bit of the background on that. So,
right.
And I think it's working out well. I think it helps everybody.
Well, I think that's helpful to help people understand how each works separate of the other. So what would be some of the most popular Y programs or services, do you think?
I think that, without a doubt at this hot minute, the basketball program has a long-standing tradition of just being a great connector in town. It draws children from all over the community, and we're organized into a classic youth basketball league. And we have volunteers who are coaches, who are, parents, and to me, that's a program that without a doubt is always very, very popular. But we also, we are the go-to for, the lap swimmers, the folks who love their water fitness classes. That honestly is sort of the magic of the Y. The Y is made up of a myriad of smaller communities, and these are folks who are devoted to their group because you develop deep relationships and ties to people if you're going to the same group exercise class, or you're in a fencing program and you work with the same instructor over many years. So we have so many programs, and of course the school age childcare that I mentioned before, that's not on site at the building, but off at the elementary schools every day after school, we're operating a program that's essential for families. They really rely on that for the quality of their lives and to be able to do what they need to do to earn a living. And also for us to provide another opportunity for learning and growing, especially in the areas of social emotional growth. So the Y is really made up of just this wide range of groups. And you mentioned magic before. I mean, I've often said kind of the secret sauce of the Y, and this is the case across the nation, is that we really are about connection. And I'm, I get kind of on my soapbox about that it is so essential that we as a nation have these physical places where we as neighbors can interact both formally, informally, because that is what builds trust. That is what builds mutual respect and understanding. And we need those spaces to interact. And that's what the Y does really well. It's just what we are. It's who we are.
That's great. It really is. And thanks for sharing that and explaining that, because the more we talk to our neighbors, the more we know each other.
Exactly.
It's so easy to put people into stereotypes and say, this one fits this mold or whatever, but nobody really fits any mold. And when you get to know somebody, you're like, oh, right.
Exactly.
My stereotype really has there's no reason to use it. But so
and
anyway,
at the Y,
thank you
people, I was just going to say, people who interact, it's with a mutual interest. They're doing something that they both share. And that's really important.
So what's one of the best ways? I'm Mr. Community Member, and I don't know much about the Y. So how do I get informed about the Y? How do I stay informed about the Y? How do I know what you're doing? Where do I go to find that sort of stuff?
Well, certainly our website is a great source of information, and that's PrincetonYMCA.org. And we do our best. Of course, as I mentioned, we're a little bit limited in staffing right now. So once upon a time, our communications, I think, were more robust, but the communications team is now yours truly. So it's been, we've had to really sort of limit the staffing structure until we can kind of get back on our feet financially entirely. But I think that we try our best to make ourselves accessible to local outlets and the town topics. We try to generate periodic updates to the community. And we certainly have an e-newsletter that people can opt into. So we do our darndest to try to get the word out there. But of course, the ultimate way is just to come by and say hi and introduce yourself and learn about us. And we're always happy to give a tour. I think that people are always kind of pleasantly surprised when they come through our doors, because we get and appreciate that our building doesn't exactly scream modern facility, but I think people are genuinely kind of surprised when they come in that we've really done our best over the years to kind of keep it fresh, and we're anticipating doing some more investments that way shortly to kind of bring it back to life.
Yeah. Don't judge a book by its cover. Go inside and see what it's really like. Exactly. It is very nice, because I know you gave me a tour not too long ago. I think the Y is a great place. So, Kate, I guess there's changes in how the Y is going to be managed coming up.
Yeah,
Can you share some detail on that?
Yes, I'm happy to do that. So leading up to the pandemic, our board had been doing some serious thinking about the issues that we face as an organization with, and as we mentioned, an older building that needs some TLC, if not, a new start altogether. And, we're a smaller Y. In the Y world, we're called what's called an independent YMCA, meaning we're a standalone with one facility. There are many YMCAs across the country that have multiple branches. And an example would be, the New York City YMCA, where, they probably have 25 branches that we call them. And in essence, they are one association with one CEO and one executive leadership team. And then at the branch level, there's a branch executive director and then your program staff. And the idea behind that is then, everybody's working in unison. You can use your resources better. You can, collectively have more impact because you're not having so much duplication. So as we as an organization have faced the challenges of a building that has had years of deferred maintenance, the reality is that just not enough was invested over the years. I started talking to a colleague of mine whom I've known for many years. His name's David Curcieri, and he's the CEO of the Greater Somerset County YMCA north of us. We share the Montgomery Township area, which is located in Somerset County, but it's in the Princeton YMCA is what we call the service area. And so David and I started chatting, and as time went along, it became evident that there might be an opportunity for us to work together, especially in Montgomery, but also just in other areas, because they are an association with multiple branches. And they're headquartered in Basking Ridge, but they have 5 locations at present. So we started in a discussion seriously and at the board level, we were discussing our sustainability issues and what would make sense for us to explore potential deepening collaboration and potential merger. And so we did that work, and we formed committees, and we had both our boards talk to each other, and we did our due diligence, and we were on the threshold 2 years ago about this time when wham, we got our worlds turned upside down. So we put that on hold. But the exciting thing is we are now at that place where we have resumed those plans, and we're now anticipating that effective March 1st, in just a few weeks, we will become a branch of the Greater Somerset County YMCA. And that means I will have a different role. I'm not going anywhere, but my focus will be more on deepening the relationships in the community and accessing resources, so we can be much more future focused rather than just being always in the reactive mode. And my colleague David is going to continue in his role as the CEO of the overall Somerset Association. And then my colleague Paul Ziegler, many people know him in town. I'm really excited because he will then step into the branch executive director role. So he will be the boots on the ground in Princeton. The name won't change. I mean, we'll still be the Princeton YMCA. The goal here is that we're the same Y, the same community Y that reflects the community, only better is the idea. And the other part of that is our board will no longer be the fiduciary board. They will be more of an advisory board. But again, that's going to be a great relief because for so many years they were dealing with existential things. Now they can focus again on a future vision for our why, and also what community needs there are, and how can we be better and more inclusive as an organization. So we're very excited about it. I think it's and I've known David a long time, and I have such high regard for him and respect for what he's been able to achieve as an organization. So I have no doubt that we are, as we like to say in the Y world, we are better together, and that this is going to be the right decision and an exciting time for the Princeton Y finally.
Yeah, I think it's encouraging when you see an organization that says, how do we continue to grow? How do we continue to do better? What, how do we create other relationships? So, congratulations to everyone involved for, staying ahead of the curve and not waiting till like, oh, geez, there's nothing we can do and we're hemmed in and we start to go down. So
thank you. No, I actually really appreciate your comment that way, because we felt like, and again, it's a credit to our volunteer board of directors who've I can't say enough about these people. These are folks who just the level of leadership and demonstrated certainly during the pandemic, but just in general, they're just a wonderful group of good-hearted, smart people who love nothing more than really providing something that's great for everybody. It's just a wonderful group to work with. And I can't say enough. Our current chair, PJ Jayachandran, is a Princeton resident. He's been on our board for 9 years or 8 years at this point. PJ will continue this year as our chair, and he will, I should mention, as part of our new structure, for Princeton representatives will join the fiduciary board of the overall association. So we'll still have representation. And that's an exciting opportunity for our leaders because, again, these are terrific people with remarkable skills. And David will say time and time again, while this is us merging into the association, from his point of view, he sees us as a tremendous asset, and not only our board members and the Princeton residents who've been so instrumental in bringing us this far. He sees that as just such a win for them. to be able to include them. So,
That's
and
great.
our staff.
Yeah. I've met PJ a few times, and great guy, really nice person, easy to talk to, but sharp. And, it just shows yourself, PJ, your staff. I mean, the caliber of people involved in making the Y such a successful organization is very impressive. So let me ask you, I think it's an important question that people should understand. How should we as residents of the community support the Y? So, how do we do that? What's the best way to do it?
Well, as a matter of fact, we just kicked off our 2022 annual campaign. And, we are very much in need of our residents and neighbors' support, to your point, because we have not recovered entirely. We've got about 70% of our revenues back in terms of membership and program fees, but we still have a ways to go to get back to where we were pre-COVID. So in order for us to keep going forward and be able to respond to our neighbors in need, and also just to keep us going for everybody, just because we are, again, providing services that are essential for regardless of one's background. The Y is for people's physical health, mental health, emotional health, spiritual health. It's an important role. They can support us with a donation to the annual campaign would be wonderful. And they can access that information on our website at princeton.org/donate. We have our board members currently campaigning. So if they come a knocking, we'd be delighted if you'd have a conversation with us. And we also, as part of those conversations, it's obviously, we are seeking financial support, but we also love to hear people's stories. And we also love to hear what it is that they would envision and imagine for a Y in their community. What would their dream be? Because like I said, we're sort of transitioning now into a future forward mode, and the imagining is kind of the exciting part. So that sort of feedback is very helpful to us right now too. So not only financial support, but also just hearing, help us dream. We want that help.
There you go. Well, I think it's important. I mean, the Y is an important organization in town. There's so many worthy nonprofits and organizations in town to support. So, but to the degree that people can make a contribution to the annual campaign, become a member of the Y. I mean, there's a bunch of things.
Absolutely. Join the Y, check out the programs, come visit us. As I said, you may be pleasantly surprised. I'm pretty sure you will be.
All right. Kate, is there anything else that the Y is looking to do? I mean, we already talked about the merger and everything and the excitement around that, but are there any other things coming up on the Y in the next few years?
Well, we're very excited, and even in the short term, in just a matter of, we are talking weeks, we are in the process of adding yet another wonderful dimension to our field. So you all, I'm sure folks have noticed, we have that absolutely gorgeous state-of-the-art outdoor basketball court that is used constantly now and was a lifesaver during COVID because we were able to provide basketball programming even during the winter. And we had a fabulous anonymous donor who helped us create what we called Winter Palooza, which meant we had lights and we had heaters out there. But that basketball court has been just such a gift. And we've gotten more positive feedback than I can even begin to recount. But we're going to be adding a pavilion next door to it, a permanent pavilion. So most folks know that we have a tent usually up, and during COVID, we've had multiple tents as part of cohorting for day camp. But we're going to have a beautiful new pavilion that will be between what is the playground and the basketball court. So it's another place for people to gather, to play together, know one another, interact in a way that, again, is what weaves us together as neighbors and friends.
It's amazing. It's amazing all you're doing. And that is great. I mean, every time I drive by there, you see people playing basketball.
Yeah. So, yeah. And it's just, and again, that was an incredible person who just happened to come by and say, listen, I see your sad little basketball court and I want to just provide this new court, because this, again, the location is so key because it's so visible and it is Princeton. It is such a part of us. So,
well, big thanks to the anonymous donor. That was very nice of them.
Yes.
So, Kate, I think we're ready to wrap up.
Great.
So really appreciate your time today. It's great talking to you. It's always good to see you.
Yes, thank you. I really enjoyed it. And I just think it's great that you're doing this. This is a wonderful way to get to know people and share the stories. And, Princeton is chock full of amazing stories and good people with big hearts. So it's wonderful that you can, tell more of the stories, pass them along.
Yeah, we're trying. It's a long list of people to reach out to.
Bet.
I could do one a day, I think. But
I think you could.
Anyway, thanks again, Kate.
It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us for episode 12 of the Princeton Podcast, produced as a community service by HG Media, providing audio, video, and website design services here in Princeton since 1999. If you enjoyed this episode of the Princeton Podcast, please share it with your friends. And be sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts.